Big Thursday here for the YouTube audience and for all of the audience. We got a lot of shows today. We will not have a regularly scheduled Friday show. That will be on Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern. So we got a lot of stuff. We got some FFT and 5 for you. And, of course, we have this awesome tight end show as Dan is here with Heath. We're going to break down his tight end tiers. Please scan that QR code in the top right and vote for us on podcastawards.com for best sports podcast and best male-hosted podcast. And here we go. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show on this Thursday morning. We've got another show coming up later tonight on Thursday evening with Liz Loza joining us. You're going to hear that. If you subscribe to the audio feed, you're going to hear that on Friday. It's going to be a fun Fantasy Jeopardy episode. For now, let's Yeah. You can come on. I was giving you the day off.
I ask all the time to do, and the one day this week that I'm not on, you are playing a game.
And you know what happened? He tapped into me for this because he knows my track record of not being great at the Jeopardy, and he wants to get someone on to look so he can look a little bit smarter. You can't have Heath on. He's amazing at the Jeopardy. I get it, Adam. You're having a rough week. We'll get into why in a little bit, but I understand what you're doing.
I really appreciate and would like to further examine your phrasing of the Jeopardy.
Well,
every time people talk about going to the Walmart, but I've never heard the Jeopardy.
Our version of Jeopardy, the FFT version of Jeopardy. The one time that Adam had me on, but I had no idea what we were playing. I had to go against Heath. I just got wiped. He wiped the floor with me, and I was like, all right, never put me on this again, please.
Yeah.
But I have a chance to redeem myself now.
Don't let Heath tell you how to pronounce things. It hasn't been his specialty this week.
Oh, yeah.
I did get, like, as soon as the podcast was over, I just realized I said archetype. And then, like, not long after, I noticed Jacob looked at me weird when I did. I was like, why is Jacob looking at me like that? And then I realized it afterwards. And then we got a tweet about it. Probably got an email about it.
Oh, yeah. Definitely got an email.
That's a St. Louis thing. Everything's just an arch, right?
I'm not from St. Louis.
Hey, but you're close. You're not that far.
I'm about the same distance from St. Louis. I was about the same distance from St. Louis that I currently am from Tampa or a little further. Jacksonville?
That's not that close. Okay, so let's talk about tight ends here. We have Apple Podcast questions also coming up later on today's show. I have a tight end trivia question for you. Then we'll get into your tiers a little bit. We do have some news items. And Dan and I are in the same Scott Fishbowl League, the Miami, Florida League. And he has the 8th pick and I have the 9th pick. So I think it would be worthwhile to compare our teams and see who Heath thinks is doing better. I have David Montgomery on my
talk
team.
About some other things about your league.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe.
There's a lot to talk about.
I know Heath will like my team better just by the David Montgomery factor. But tight end trivia for you. Which tight end has finished top 8 in PPR points per game each of the last 2 seasons, but is not ranked higher than 19th by any of our 3 analysts?
Top 8 each of the last 3 seasons.
2 seasons.
Can I look at my rankings or not?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Which tight end? Nobody else is looking at your rankings. Which tight end has finished top 8 in PPR points per game each of the last 2 seasons, but is not ranked higher than 19th by any of our 3 analysts?
Is it Logan Thomas?
It is Logan Thomas.
Yeah, that one seems obvious.
Okay, well, why isn't he ranked higher than 19th? Dave has him 19th. I think Heath has him 24th.
How many games did he play last year?
So he played 6, but actually the points per game is only based on 5 games because he played 5 snaps, I think.
So he was not technically, like, if someone went and sorted on a different site that was not an Adam Azer site and looked at the fantasy points per game last year, he would not be a top 8 tight end by fantasy points per game.
If you looked on fftoday.com, which is where I always look, then he would be because they don't count that game because it didn't have any stats.
This is a classic example of an Azer stack gone wrong. An Azer stack gone wrong.
He played 5 snaps. You're gonna count that game?
What I'm saying, like, this is a good use of Azer stats, and this is appropriate. But if this were a Jeopardy question, your answer would be factually incorrect.
Well, first of all, it would have to be asked. The answer would have to be in the form of a question. And secondly, we say the Jeopardy now. But actually, the reason why, I use that site, fftoday.com, and that's the reason why I saw, he finished 8th last year. Then I realized, I said, wait a second, did he finish even higher? Because he had this one game with 5 snaps, and they had already accounted for that. But the bottom line is, in those 5 games, he had 196 yards and 3 touchdowns on 25 targets. So that's interesting. And the year before that, he was 4th per game in PPR, 6th and a half PPR, 9th in full PPR, or 9th in non-PPR, pardon me. Oh no, I switched that around. I'm sorry. That was his final season stats, not his per game. In 2020, per game, he was 6th in full PPR, 8th in half PPR, and 11th in non-PPR. But it's 2 fantasy relevant years in a row, even though a very abridged one for Logan Thomas. So, Heath, you thinking about maybe moving him into tier 5 or tier 6?
He's 31 years old. He has 1 season in his NFL career with more than 200 yards receiving. And to show you how small the sample size was last year, I went to just to a different site, Football Guys, to look at where he ranked in terms of PPR fantasy points per game last year. And if you include the 6th game, he is 18th.
Why would you include the 6th game? That was
it's an illustration of how small the sample size of him being top 5 last year or top 8 last year was.
But he averaged 40 yards per game. So that
changes
bad.
Everything.
That's not that bad for a tight end. That puts him in the low end tight end range, right? I'm not saying he's a top 5 guy or a top 8 guy, but if he can average 40 yards per game, then he's probably a streamable tight end.
I think that some of that value is because of who the quarterbacks that he played with and the target competition that he had at that point versus what he has now after adding Dotson to the mix. And, especially with the quarterbacks that he had versus the quarterbacks that he has now in Wentz. Wentz is not willing to target the seam as much as those other quarterbacks. So I just don't. To me, I feel like he's going to fall off.
I don't want to sit here and make a big case for Logan Thomas.
It feels like you want to.
I think I'm going to put him on my Scott Fishbowl queue. I think, I don't know if we have a queue. We do, right?
You definitely don't have a queue.
Listen,
you've spent 20 hours on the clock. You certainly don't have a queue.
Your league mates would, if you would just join the Twitter chat for your league, they could probably explain to you how to use a queue.
They've been begging to get Azer on the chat, and all he got was, guys, sorry, I didn't do a good job of catching up and hanging in with these chats. I'm not going to join. He's the only one in our league not on the chat, by the way. He's too good for the chat. He's the only one in SFB that's too good for the chat.
In my league is in the chat, and we have probably 100 chats per day, and it's really been good stuff. We've raised money for charity. We let people know when they're on the clock so they don't use 20 hours to make their first 6 picks.
Adam's not interested in any of that.
But the best thing, though, and I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but there's also a chat for your draft position, and it's been really beneficial talking strategy with people who all have the same pick. But Twitter chats only allow 75 people in one chat, and there's more than 75 people with the 12th pick, which is unfortunate for the few people who wanted to be in and weren't allowed to. We've constantly been at 75. We had an opening come up a day or two ago because someone who was in our chat made the error of saying who they'd picked from the 11 spot. This person had somehow joined the 12s chat to get a good idea what all the 12s were talking about to better help him make picks on either side of the 12 in his draft.
Dirty. That is dirty.
I like that.
It's fantastic. He got kicked out of the group, but I applaud him. It's much better than not even joining your own league chat.
No, it's not better than not joining. It's deceitful. I wouldn't do it. All right, so listen, let's talk about our tight end tiers. So these are Heath's tight end tiers. I'm displaying them now for those of you on YouTube. You can see the first 5 tiers. There are a couple more that we're going to get into. We're doing just 6 today. So you can see the first 5. You'll see tier 6 shortly.
Logan Thomas is in tier 5. What are you talking about?
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. Neither did you. Well, are you going to move him up into your rankings? I mean, he's 24th. He's not 24th on this page.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
This would put him about 19th or so. But, all right.
No, this has him at 22nd. Good counting.
All right.
There will be a rankings update tomorrow, and it's possible that Logan Thomas will move into my top 20 tight ends.
Okay,
just kidding. He is at 19th. That was bad counting on my
part. All right, looking at the Heath's first 5 tiers here, and if you're just listening, you're not watching. Don't worry, I'll go through everything. But which tier do you usually draft from at tight end, and who's in that tier for the benefit of the people who are not looking at it right now? Heath, which tier do you usually draft from?
I would say probably 1 is the most common, followed closely by not follow it closely, but then it would be a close battle between 4 and then probably 3 right after 4.
Okay. And
I
tier
don't know
1
if
is
I've
Kelsey.
drafted in tier 2 once all year.
So Kelsey and Andrews is tier 1. Tier 2 is Waller, Pitts, and Kittle. So that's your big 5. And tier 1 is Kelsey and Andrews in the next 3. Tier 3 for Heath is Schultz, Goddard, and Hawkinson. And then tier 4, guys like Ertz, Herb Smith, Komet, Everett, Freiermuth, Gesicki. I know it's a lot of names. I'll repeat them. But Heath is usually in the Kelsey Andrews tier, or he's waiting until, the tier 4 guys are going to be round 9 or later, probably in a 12-team league. Maybe Ertz sneaks into round 8 or something. But
I think I might just change like tier 1 to great and tier 4 and 5 to late. That's kind of my strategy. Is I'd like to go great or late.
Great or late, of course. Yeah. Dan, which tier do you usually draft from at tight end?
Yeah, I think Heath nailed this. I also like to go great or late. I've been a big proponent of drafting Travis Kelce the last few years. I believe he gives you a massive advantage at the position on a weekly basis. This year, I'm actually off Kelce. I think that Tyreek Hill played a big factor in opening up the middle of the field. I know they still have those guys who run fast, but I don't think they're going to command the same kind of attention. I've seen myself drafting a lot of Mark Andrews. I think Mark Andrews is going to be tight end 1 this year. And I see myself drafting a lot of Zach Ertz, Gerald Everett, and Cole Kmet. So really it is great or late for me as well. But I don't know why you're laughing. I thought that was a good name.
It's a great name, especially considering I made it up. But I'm wondering if I can start suing you guys every time you say it. Remember there was that like 3-peat thing with Pat Riley, or he tried to coin that, and I feel like there's some potential litigation in the future here. But all right.
I also think Heath's ahead of the time. Like a lot of people I still see ranking a lot Freiermuth and Gesicki way ahead of Everett and Komet. I'm with Heath. I think Everett and Komet should be ahead. So I think these are just a really good set of rankings personally, but I don't think they adhere completely to ADP. I see a lot of people drafting some of those other guys ahead of guys that Heath has ranked higher, and they should. I also would put Ertz a little bit higher personally.
In my Scott Fishbowl draft, I'm pretty sure Gesicki went ahead of both Goddard and Hawkinson.
There you go.
So you're a huge kiss ass, by the way. But anyway, which
no, they're just good rankings.
Which
Adam,
tiers?
Adam, have I ever kissed your butt on this show? Will I ever?
I don't think anybody wants that to happen. So I'm actually looking for the first time. I don't know why I haven't looked at this of what Travis Kelce did without Tyreek Hill 3 years ago, 2019. So it was a 4 games. I don't know if we want to count week 1. Tyreek Hill only played 12 snaps. We can count that one. But the production for Kelce was, it was good. Wasn't amazing. Let's see. Week 1, he had 88 yards. Week 2, he had 107 yards. Week 3, he had 89 yards. Week 4, 85 yards. Week 5, 70 yards. That's pretty good.
That is pretty good. But, I mean, a lot of that was also it's not the only factor that scares me. The age is obviously also a factor here.
Okay. Yeah. Which tier do you usually avoid, Heath?
Tier 2.
That would be the Waller, Pitts, Kittle tier. How about you, Dan?
It's players for me. I won't draft Kittle this year. I won't be drafting Schultz at all this year. I probably won't be drafting Pitts because he's drafted a little too high for me. But I do like Goddard and Hawkinson out of that 3rd tier. So it's just players for me.
So it sounds like you're not drafting in tier 2, though.
No, I end up with Waller a good amount. Waller falls. Yeah.
Okay.
I like
and
Waller.
I would be fine with Waller, Kittle, or Pitts on the occasion, but no, I shouldn't say Pitts because he never does. But occasionally Waller or Kittle falls into round 5, and then I'm good with it. I'm not taking any of those guys in the first 4 rounds.
I agree with Heath on that, minus Kittle though for me.
Dan, did you grow up or go to college with a guy named Andrew Tague?
Andrew Tate. This is no. What? Why?
Because he just chatted. He just commented in our chat. Dan Schneider is a genius.
I have a lot more fans than you'd imagine, Adam. You'll see as we go on. We were starting to see the comments flow in when you put that tweet out the other day, just trying to bash me and defame me. There were a lot of people who stood up for me, and you know what? You saw it in the replies, and we're gonna get up to that tweet a little bit later because you've been really rocked on it since. A lot has happened. A lot has happened since.
We've probably got 30 minutes before we get to that, Dan, or at least 20.
Oh.
I think you have plenty of time to take the YouTube link that Adam tweeted out to promote this show and paste it in the chat of your Miami, Florida Scott Fishbowl division. And hopefully we can get a few of those participants in the YouTube chat so that when we have the discussion, we can have a little bit of their feedback about the performance of Adam in this draft as well.
I think that's a great idea, Heath, especially because he's not really liked in that chat.
All right. Last question.
Just let the listeners know real quick what's going on with that. Adam refused to join the SFB chat for our division. He's the only one not in the chat.
Okay.
Let's just make that clear for the listeners.
Okay. This is very clear then. Last question about tiers. Isn't Dalton Schultz a one-man tier, and aren't one-man tiers great, Heath?
I generally avoid one-man tiers, although I think you could say that Deshaun Watson should be a one-man tier, or Alvin Kamara should be a one-man tier. Some people would say Jonathan Taylor should be a one-man tier. Travis Kelce has been a one-man tier in the past. I'm conflicted. It's kind of been hate on Dalton Schultz week on Twitter this week. So your praise of him will be a needed change. But I just think, looking at what he did last year, I don't know that I really believe he can be better than that.
Agreed.
And what that was 0.3 of a point better than TJ Hawkinson, and about a point per game better than Dallas Goedert. But that's almost entirely because he scored 8 touchdowns on 800 yards receiving, and Goddard scored 4 touchdowns on 800 yards receiving. So I have a hard time making a case for separation between Dalton Schultz and those other two guys. Now, I think Dan would even put him behind those guys. I wouldn't go quite that far, but I'd have a hard time making a case for him definitely being better than those guys.
I would actually keep him above Goddard, but behind Hawkinson. But it's more, the issue for me is more, I think Heath has it right here. He has them all in one tier, but you're seeing Schultz drafted ahead of those two guys too often by a large margin, and he's almost creeping up into, from an ADP standpoint, into tier 2. That's where I have a problem with Dalton Schultz.
Yeah, I can see that. So tier 3 for Heath is Schultz, Goddard, Hawkinson, and obviously I very much prefer Schultz out of this tier. I think he is in a separate tier because I think, maybe going into the off season, maybe in February, I could see this being a 3-person tier, but Goddard's situation to me has gotten worse. Hawkinson's situation to me is probably worse. It depends, I guess, on Jamison Williams, but even DJ Chark could be an upgrade over what they've had, and Amon-Ra St. Brown has emerged since the last time we saw TJ Hawkinson on the field. Schultz's situation has clearly gotten better to me. So, losing Cooper, Gallup coming back from a torn ACL, and he's going to be on, in my opinion, clearly the most prolific passing offense between him, Goddard, and Hawkinson. It's not even going to be close. They might lead the league in pass attempts. So he doesn't.
Why exactly would the Cowboys lead the league in pass attempts this year?
They've done it once under Kellen Moore.
Right, but they did it before when the defense was in shambles. Now they've completely revamped the defense.
Sure. I'm not sure how good their defense is going to be. They were a defense that was very, very turnover reliant last year, and those defenses, you can set a clock to it. They always regress.
But they also have maybe the best young edge rusher in the NFL, and potentially one of the best young cornerbacks in the NFL.
He's interesting. He gets beat a lot. And he makes a lot.
He is boomer bust. He is boomer bust. I wanted to see if you were going to be able to call that out, but you did a good job with that, Adam.
Oh, don't quiz me on this, okay? But that's just Kellen Moore's nature. So I think that his situation moves him. Dalton Schultz's situation to me moves him clearly ahead of Goddard and Hawkinson.
I think these three are a great test of my theory that for the most part, wide receiver additions and subtractions impact other wide receivers.
Yes.
And tight end buckets within an offense that can be changed a little bit, but are often unchanged by changes to the rest. Now, that we'll see how that works out this year. We'll also see with Waller how much Devontae Adams, I'm far more concerned about what Adams will do to Hunter Renfrow than I am Adams to Waller.
Same.
So it will be a good test of that.
Yeah, but he doesn't have to be better than he was last season, Dalton Schultz. He was 5th per game, and he had 104 targets. I guess if you're going to take him in round 5, he has to be better. if you're going to take him in round 6,
exactly.
I don't think he does have to be better because I still think he'll be a big advantage over most of the other tight ends drafted behind him. I do think that.
What do you mean by big advantage?
See, that's the problem. Yeah.
Big advantage, it might not necessarily show up in the points per game, but I would guess
probably won't care about it.
No, but you should because here's the problem with the tight ends that finish behind him. All right, and before I make this point, let me just look up some of the names that.
And I just want to, while you're looking that up, I want to say he does have to be better in terms of volume or yardage efficiency, because it's very likely that his touchdown rate is going to regress.
Yes,
he had almost an 8% touchdown rate last year, and that's just not something that. Now, Jared Cook had a 2 or 3 year stretch where he did it, and Gronk did it all the time, and it's possible that he has another 8% touchdown year. But I think it's more fair to project something closer to 6.5. So he probably needs to pick up an extra point per game in catches and yards to match his points per game from last year.
Okay, so for the record, Dalton Schultz averaged as many points per game as Darren Waller last year. And he was, almost 2 points per game better than Kyle Pitts, 1.6 points per game better than Zach Ertz, and very close to TJ Hawkinson, as Heath mentioned, only 0.3 points per game in full PPR better than TJ Hawkinson, who had a lot of catches, 83 catches in 12 games. But here's why it matters, Heath, that he'll be. Here's what I mean by he'll be better than the guys behind him. You do not have 12 must-start tight ends ever. You'll probably have 6 or 7, and then most of the league is streaming. So, yeah, sure. You could look at, say, Hunter Henry, who averaged 10.3 points per game. But what an inconsistent player, and what a guy who was so touchdown dependent. You get so many of those tight ends where they might just be awful. Dalton Schultz is going to be they might be awful some weeks, they might be good some weeks, but it depends if they catch that touchdown. Dalton Schultz will be one of the last tight ends drafted who I think will be a slam dunk must-start tight end where you don't have to even worry about tight end.
You think that Goddard and Hawkinson will be streamers?
I think they have the potential to be streamers because Dallas Goedert, when Zach Ertz was there, averaged something like 4 targets per game. When Zach Ertz was there, and they were throwing the ball a lot then. Now they've got a year 2 Devontae Smith, and they just brought in A.J. Brown, who's certainly going to command more targets than Zach Ertz did.
I do have an Azer stats correction.
But Azer, what we don't... Oh, yeah, go ahead first.
We need an Azer stats correction because we started the show with Logan Thomas and Azer statting his way to a top 8 tight end. Darren Waller was 2 fantasy points per game better than Dalton Schultz last year until the game that he played 24% of the snaps.
Where does he find these stats?
What?
I said, where does Azer find these stats? They're just getting debunked left and right here.
Okay,
but Adam, your whole argument there didn't address Heath's concern, which is basically my main concern too. Touchdown regression is one of the stickiest things. That's one of the things we can count on most year after year. And you just talked about it with Dalton Schultz, just over 100 targets. His slot snap's not that high. His average depth of target not that high. So he does rely on those. Last year, his scoring did rely a lot on those touchdowns and that high touchdown percentage.
He could easily play more in the slot this year now that CeeDee Lamb is going to be playing outside in Amari Cooper's spot, right? So Cooper was playing outside, and when Gallup was on the field, CeeDee Lamb was largely in the slot. So
I'm not counting on that to be sticky. I think
that is going to happen. Mike McCarthy said that CeeDee Lamb is going to play Amari Cooper's role.
We will see if that continues all throughout the season, considering how good Lamb was in the slot. We'll see.
No, I think he was better out wide. He was more productive out wide.
I know on a per snap basis, yes, but
so why would that change?
Because 2 years ago, when you put him in the slot, there was no one who could cover him in the NFL in the slot.
2 years ago, the 5 games that Dak Prescott played?
Yes.
He wasn't good after that. Yeah, but Dak Prescott was throwing 52 times per game in that stretch.
And he was unguardable in the slot. It's hard to defend Lamb on a 2-way.
They're going to put him outside. They said they're going to put him outside.
I know, but I just think they're going to mix him in the slot still. Time will tell on that one. We'll check that in around week 6, 7.
They might, but obviously there's an opportunity for more slot snaps. Okay,
sure. That's fair.
All right, look, I don't want to overthink it here. I know Dalton Schultz isn't so he's not as talented as the 5 guys ranked ahead of him. Kelsey, Andrews, Waller.
I don't think he's as talented as Goddard or Hawkinson either.
I don't think he's anywhere close to Goddard or Hawkinson. And I think you can make a case that
I don't understand that.
Komet is more talented than Schultz and may have more target opportunities.
I don't understand this talent that's been assigned to Dallas Goedert. I mean,
really?
I just
I don't play.
Do you see the production? I mean, this guy has had a very overrated career.
He's in a run first offense right now. I understand.
Okay, so then that's what I'm saying. He's in a run first offense, but he didn't catch. The last 10 games of the year did not catch a single touchdown pass from Jalen Hurts. He had a huge game with 2 touchdowns from Gardner Minshew. So I just think that Dallas Goedert has been assigned this value that he hasn't lived up to, and Hawkinson.
Goddard had the 5th most yards after the catch last year of all tight ends. Where
Gerald Everett had a lot of yards after the catch.
I like Gerald Everett. I like Gerald Everett a lot this year.
You, Dan, more than anyone, were dumping on TJ Hawkinson last year, right?
Because of exactly what we just discussed earlier in this podcast. The replacement value of when you start to push the Schultz and Hawkinsons up into round 5, which is where they're starting to go, and creeping even higher.
I'm not taking it in round 5.
But that's what happened with Hawkinson last year, and that's what we're starting to see with Schultz this year. That's what we're so against.
Yeah, I don't know that Dan was poo-pooing Hawkinson as much as anybody last year. I think I was. I mean, I had to say something mean about TJ Hawkinson every preseason show we did because he was being drafted ahead of Mark Andrews for a while.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, Dalton Schultz is still has a 6th round ADP, and TJ Hawkinson is going basically the same exact ADP as Dalton Schultz, 66th overall. Dallas Goedert's at 83rd overall.
So,
but I do think just it's the pass volume and the prolific pass offense that I'm buying into for Schultz.
I agree with that part, and just to go back to I think you would admit if Dalton Schultz were to change places with Dallas Goedert or TJ Hawkinson, if those guys were traded for each other, whoever was traded to Dallas would be drafted 2 to 3 rounds ahead of Dalton Schultz all of a sudden.
1,000,000%.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's is not Dalton Schultz is so great. It's that I think he is going to be a must-start tight end because of volume. I am on the clock in the Scott Fishbowl.
Oh, once again,
that's never stopped you before.
Yeah. How often have we looked? Oh yeah, let's do that.
We should do this now because I have a pick and Dan has picks right after me. So I could share my screen here. Should I do that?
Yes.
Let's give the listeners a little bit of background on what went down in the Scott Fishbowl in our division. Should I do that, Adam? Should I recap?
Sure. Hold on. Go for it here. I got to do a little.
Scott Fishbowl. Obviously, everyone knows what it is. Me and Adam drafting in the same division, pick after each other. The Scott Fishbowl starts on Monday. I'm still on vacation. I have 2 more days left of vacation. So you know what? I take my time with my picks because I didn't see the notifications. I'm not by my phone. I'm enjoying my vacation. Adam knows I'm on vacation. Anyway, I wake up.
Vacation for 3 weeks, by the way, but
no, it was an 8-day vacation and the only one I took this year. So let's make that clear. But I see a tweet in the middle of the vacation toward the end from Adam Azer, just absolutely destroying me for taking so long, taking 11 hours combined for my picks, only to find out 1 day later, Adam nearly clocks out of his pick. And then we look today and Adam has taken 20 hours to make his picks while I've only taken 11. So all of that, we throw it out, we put it out there into the ether. And then finally, the icing on the cake here. Adam refused to join our division chat. It has 11 of the 12 members. He's too good for the division chat. And by the way, in this division chat, me and Adam are getting absolutely roasted on a daily basis. They're like, oh, back to the CBS, guys. Guess we're going to have to wait 10 hours again for a pick. Well, and yeah, go ahead.
So I do think we should think about this. The Scott Fishbowl started at approximately this time on Monday. Uh-huh. So it's been 72 hours, if my math's correct, right? Yeah. And I think we've decided that the time when the clock's off doesn't count against your time.
Right.
Which is, I think, 6 hours a day. Which would mean it's been about 54 hours that this draft's been going on, that the clock's been running. And I believe what I saw is that 31 of those 54 hours, you or Adam has been on the clock. So over half of this draft, they've been waiting on you or Adam to make a pick. I think they are well within their rights to be complaining about how long you guys are taking to pick.
All right, well, I'm going to make a pick now.
I can't disagree with that. So I do want to point out, once again, Adam has taken almost nearly double the time that I've taken.
All right, so let's make some picks. So I have, I'll show you all my lineup. I have Trey Lance and Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts and Trey Lance at quarterback. This is a super flex league. It's a tight end premium league where tight end scoring is basically double. They get a full point for a catch, a full point for a first down. Everyone else gets a half a point for a catch, half a point for a first down. Quarterbacks get a half a point for a rushing first down, but completion percentage matters too. So Hurts and Lance are an interesting duo. I have David Montgomery and J.K. Dobbins at running back, and I have Chris Godwin at wide receiver. Travis Kelce was my first pick. He's my tight end.
I think you should find some week 1 starters. That's what you should be looking for.
I'm basically just kind of going for it, right? I mean, I'm hoping Dobbins and Godwin don't end up on the pup list.
I've got Godwin on my team. Godwin and DeAndre Hopkins paired up, but I took them in round 7 and round 10 or 11. So
you know what they always say: if you can draft players who are injured and might not start the season, you might as well do it, right?
I'm gonna take DK Metcalf. I don't have him on any team.
Oh my god, gross.
What round are you in?
7.
I'm on the Chris Towers train. I think there's going to be weeks where like, should we start DK Metcalf over Russell Gage against X and X or like whatever?
Yeah, I agree. I don't know that there's a wide receiver.
We're going to have a rough time with Metcalf this year, I think.
But look at the wide receivers that are left. Metcalf, Allen Robinson, Amari Cooper, Darnell Mooney.
Well, I'm picking after you, so I'm certainly not going to give my opinion on any of these.
I could take Jerry Jeudy.
No, please take DK Metcalf.
I am going to take DK Metcalf.
Thank you. So
I might get Jimmy Garoppolo, and then you're going to regret not having DK Metcalf.
Yeah, I'll certainly regret it.
All right, Dan, you're on the clock now. So let's see. What's your team?
So let me make it clear for the fishbowl. I always have a similar strategy. It's boom or bust. I don't draft this to look good in my league by competing for a 7-5 or 8-4 record. I'm looking to go for it because this is a large field tournament and you need to take a very high variance approach. So I took a very, very high variance approach with my team by going Kyler Murray in the first round, not a very high variance pick, but Derrick Henry in round 2, very high variance pick. I think there's still potential outcomes where he could be RB1. I'm not buying into the age factor here yet. I think that he's coming back healthy. And then I went with Trevor Lawrence only because I was sniped by you for Trey Lance. I see a big drop off after Trey Lance at that pick. It was your best pick of the draft, Adam. But then I continued a high variance route by going Javonte Williams and Cam Akers, both players who I think have a path towards a lot of volume and have a path towards a high score, high finish. And then in round 6, I'm a big believer in stacking. So I went Marquise Brown over a few receivers I had ranked higher because I already have Kyler Murray on the roster.
Okay. You don't have a tight end though, and
that's a problem.
Yeah. Are there any tight ends left?
I've been missing. Not really. I've been missing out. No, Dallas Goedert. Is he still on the board, Adam?
Yeah, he's still on the board. If you like him, take him.
I missed out on Hawkinson. I don't think I could see myself taking Goddard right now over some of the receivers that are on the board. Though I do like Goddard.
All right, so I took Metcalf and you slammed me for it. So let's see which wide receiver you prefer here.
Well, I'm leaning toward either Jerry Jeudy or Allen Robinson here for sure with this pick, and I would take them over. I would take both of them over DK Metcalf.
Jeudy was my second pick there. Gabriel Davis. So we still have Amari Cooper, Darnell Mooney, Rashad Bateman, Allen Robinson, Jerry Jeudy, Gabriel Davis, Adam Thielen, and Juju Smith-Schuster. Michael Thomas was another guy I was considering.
There's actually a lot of good receivers left on the board. I'm surprised you weren't considering Devontae Smith for the stack purposes, but it might be a little too early.
Yeah.
It's a high variance.
He is still available in round 12 of my draft.
There you go. So that's probably not a good idea. I'm either going with one of those two receivers or Goddard. I just need to take a quick look at these tight ends after Goddard to see how bad it's going to be. No, actually, I see someone I actually like more than Goddard in fantasy that I think will still be on the board. So I'm going to wait there.
Adam really should have taken Goddard.
Yeah.
No, I don't like him. I'm off Goddard. I'd rather have Dawson Knox later.
This is round 7 of a tight end premium draft.
I'd
rather
have DK Metcalf.
Are we going up? Are we going back toward the back end of the draft right now? We are, because
we're not picking for a while.
No, we're not picking for a while. Oof.
Let's go, Schneier. This is why people hate us.
No, this is not. He's been on the clock for like 2 minutes.
Yeah, this is going to help my time a lot.
You guys took 2 minutes.
This is going to help my time a lot if I don't take a player here. Let's go a little further into the show. I need to think a little bit on this.
Oh my gosh! Okay, we're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to give you some quick news items and then finish up with the tight end tiers on fantasy football today. All right, Dan Schneier is still on the clock after that commercial break, which was a minute long if you're listening, but was only 3 seconds long if you're viewing. Some news and notes real quick. Rob Gronkowski insists he is done with football. Even if Tom Brady calls him, he is done. Chicago acquired N'Keal Harry from the New England Patriots. I love this time of year. There's really not a lot of news. Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold, according to the Panthers GM, Scott Fitterer, they are going to compete for the starting job. I don't think we buy that, or that we buy that Darnold has a chance. Dallas rookie wide receiver Jalen Tolbert will enter training camp as a presumed starter, according to The Athletic.
He's getting some real buzz because I saw Harmon actually liked his profile a lot as well. I'm getting more interested in Jalen Tolbert.
All right, and Gabriel Davis weighs 227 pounds, so he has put on some weight. How do you feel about
Najee Harris?
He's still less than Najee Harris, but how do you feel about? Does that matter to you? Gabriel Davis gaining weight?
I have a hard time understanding the case for Gabriel Davis as this super high upside borderline number 2 wide receiver anyway. So,
okay. Yeah. And that's why I like Dawson Knox more than most people. It's just everyone just, not everyone, but so many people just assume Gabriel Davis is going to step into that role. But why not Dawson? Not Dawson Knox is not going to be the number 2 target. But why can't he have a big target boost? Okay.
Adam, I don't think. Let's see. I'm trying to make my pick, and it's telling me I'm not on the clock. Oh, never mind. Here we go. All right. The pick is in, Adam. I only took what? 3 total minutes?
You picked? Let's see what the pick is.
Okay, so
I'm not seeing it. What'd you pick? Who'd you pick?
You're not seeing it? Jerry Jeudy.
Oh, Jerry Jeudy. Okay.
Okay, just keep scrolling, Adam. Scroll down, please. Just for the listeners, and in case anybody, keep going. So
yeah, I'm here. It's 20 hours for me and 11 hours for
and nobody else in your league is. Now there's one person at 9 hours, so that's something.
Thank you. I think a lot of that was overnight for me.
No, they don't count the overnight. We've already established that. So
they don't count all of the overnight, but they do count some of it. So let's go back to the tiers. Tier 1 is Kelsey and Andrews. They are, you could go as early as the first round for these guys. Heath, you think they're both top 13, right?
Yes. Yeah, they're definitely top 15 in PPR leagues. Half PPR, a little lower. Non-PPR, they're back into round 2.
So, Dan, you rank Andrews ahead of Kelsey?
Not quite yet. I still have Kelsey higher, but, I've did a little research into tight ends last night before the show, and that's what really put me a little extra research into tight ends. That would put me back on the Andrews train. And I almost now regret I had a chance for Andrews or Henry in round 2 of the SFB. And then, that's a little bit deeper. It's mid round 2, but I thought Henry has more league winning upside, but I don't know, looking more into just exactly what Andrews did last year. Leading the league in slot snaps was really important. Leading the league for tight ends. I mean, as far as, second in the league after Kyle Pitts in average depth of target, not including Rob Gronkowski, who's not coming back. And just the overall volume there as well, because of all the slot snaps. I think he has a chance to really pace the field at tight end this year if we see any kind of drop off at all with Kelsey via his age or just not having Hill.
Okay. I don't know. I don't want to get into this, I guess, because we do it so often. But
are you not an Andrews fan? Is that why?
No,
I don't really.
Little concerned about the pass volume going way down.
Why would it go way down? Oh, because the offense is so run heavy.
Yeah. If they go back to what they were to the previous 2 seasons. And I'm not concerned about this. I think it's probably a little fluky, but his target share was something like 22% with Lamar Jackson and 23% with Lamar Jackson and 29.4% without Lamar Jackson. He was on pace for 136 targets with Jackson and 184 targets without Jackson. He was on pace for over 1,700 yards without Lamar Jackson. He was on pace for less than 1,200 yards, 1,141 with Jackson. I do not really care about that. Do you care about that?
The numbers you said with Jackson are all elite for a tight end.
He would have been. Yes. Okay. All right. So ready? His 11 games with Lamar Jackson, 17 game pace is 87 catches, 1,141 yards, 8 touchdowns on 136 targets. Look at that in points per game. Would have made him the number 2 tight end in fantasy behind Kelsey. But it would have made him, this is big to me, the number 20 wide receiver per game. Whereas Travis Kelce is always a top 12 wide receiver per game. So, yes, those are great numbers for a tight end. No, they are not top 15 overall pick.
Those are very close to my projections, except that I have 10 touchdowns instead of 8. And the reason for that discrepancy would be the fact that Lamar Jackson just had an incredibly bad touchdown season compared to what he's been every other year in the league.
Yeah, there's a good chance for positive touchdown regression, not just for Jackson, but for Andrews. I agree with Heath on that.
Okay, let's go to the second tier then. And we haven't gotten a lot of love for this tier. It's such talented players, though. Darren Waller, Kyle Pitts, and George Kittle. That's the tier for Heath. If you're watching on YouTube, I hope you can see that clearly. Darren Waller, Kyle Pitts, and George Kittle. Anything to say about this tier, Heath?
I do still think, like I said, this is the tier I don't draft. That this is also the end of the area where I think you could find a tight end one without just something really strange happening. It's Darren Waller and Devontae Adams could both dominate targets, and Hunter Renfrow could get left out in the rain, and Waller could find his way back to tight end one. Kyle Pitts, I suppose it's possible that Marcus Mariota could be good enough to carry him to a tight end one season. And like, so the San Francisco, something different happens all the time. If they come out and George Kittle's a 25% target share guy and Brandon Ayuk's a 20% target share guy and Deebo Samuel is running the ball 8 times a game, like George Kittle could be tight end one. So these are the last 3 guys who could legitimately be tight end one.
Does it matter to you that Waller wasn't really that good when Henry Ruggs was there? I mean, he was good, but because I'm just saying, his season kind of took off after the Ruggs incident. And now you got Devontae Adams coming in. So
I think one thing that we haven't discussed a lot about Waller, which is why I like him, and I haven't heard it much, is the addition of Josh McDaniels in that offense. We've seen Josh McDaniels at times and the Patriots utilize tight ends and get the most out of those tight ends. That's going to help. He's going into a system that's going to be very tight end friendly for him. And I think there's going to be a lot more easy targets for him, but that's not to say there weren't in the past. But a lot of it I thought was driven by just not having that much talent around him and the offense kind of revolving around Waller. I don't think that's going to be the case with Adams on the roster, but this is a tight end friendly offense, and that's going to help Waller, I think, overall.
Did Ruggs not play week 1, I guess, either?
No. He was great in week 1. He had 20 targets.
He played that one. Yeah.
And Ruggs was on the team in 2020 as well, right?
But he started to emerge in 2021. He started to get more targets and be a better player, and he wasn't even close to what Devontae Adams. Look, I was just asking if that mattered to you.
No, and I really don't like it when you bring it up.
All right, but I think it's the only time he's been on the field with a guy who was even close to a wide receiver. Well, I guess you could say Renfrow, but I don't know, because Renfrow took off also after the Ruggs incident. I would say overall, Ruggs had an impact on the production of both Hunter Renfrow.
How many weeks was that?
6.
Okay.
All right, let's go to. Let's kind of skip tier 3. No, actually, I have a follow-up question on tier 2. Dan, going back to a year ago, I think you had some concerns about how George Kittle would fit in a Trey Lance-led offense. We never really saw it, although the target share, I think Dave brought it up, was pretty low for Kittle when Lance played. There wasn't much, though. I think it was a game and a half, 6 quarters, basically. But, you still have those concerns?
Yeah, that was actually the nicest thing you ever said about me. A few shows ago, I wasn't on it, but I was listening, and Adam was like, "Yeah, Dan Schneider brought this up like last year," and it was when Dave was breaking down his concerns for Kittle. So thank you so much. But yeah, those concerns remain for me. I think the offense is going to look a lot different overall this year once Lance is installed as a full-time starter. We're going to see more zone read. That's not something we've seen a lot with Jimmy Garoppolo. You can't really run zone read with Jimmy Garoppolo. And one thing we've known from Shanahan over the years is he is willing to adjust his system to the personnel he's had around him. He's done a great job of that with Kyle Juszczyk. And I think with Lance, we're going to see that. So I think the first read will be the X receiver a lot more often based on them playing more zone read. And that's going to be probably Ayuk. So I actually am a little higher on him than most. But as far as Kittle goes, there's so many concerns I have. It's the offensive system. It's losing Jimmy Garoppolo and the rapport he had with him. And overall, it's the total volume of the passing game that I think will go down there. And that doesn't even factor in the injury concerns with Kittle. So he's a player I haven't found myself drafting at all.
Okay. And that was a very adorable pronunciation of Juszczyk. You almost got that.
I knew it was.
Is there an archetype of Kyle Juszczyk?
Don't you hate when you're about to say someone's name and you're 2 seconds before I don't know how to pronounce this name?
Yes, that you saw me pause before saying it.
Yeah, what I often do is just say it confidently one way and then try to work it into my sentence again in like 30 seconds and say it a slightly different way. So that way people will just think I
like
mispronounced it one of the other times.
All right, tier 3 is Schultz, Goddard, and Hawkinson. Heath has already established he no longer thinks these guys have tight end 1 upside, and I think we have spent enough time on this tier, Schultz, Goddard, and Hawkinson. Tier 4 is Zach Ertz, Herb Smith, Gerald Everett, Cole Kmet, Pat Freiermuth, and Mike Gesicki. Zach Ertz, Herb Smith, Gerald Everett, Cole Kmet, Pat Freiermuth, and Mike Gesicki. First question for you, Heath, is how come Ertz is in this tier and not the tier above with Schultz, Goddard, and Hawkinson?
I thought he was washed when he left Philly, and he went to Arizona and got to play without DeAndre Hopkins in a high volume pass offense and really did some things that changed my mind. But I am worried their wide receiver 1 will be Marquise Brown, and he will be there week 1. And then by the time we get to week 7, we might have Marquise Brown and DeAndre Hopkins. And prior to last year, this wasn't an offense that really used their tight end very much.
He played a lot more in Arizona than he did in Philadelphia. In 6 games with the Eagles, he played more than 64% of the snaps only once. In 11 games,
they thought he was washed too.
He played 73% or more of the snaps in 10 of 11 games, and he was playing 90% or more of the snaps by the end of the season. So they do like him, and he did not catch a lot of touchdowns with the Cardinals, but I do think he had a lot of. Yeah, he had from week 7 through 18, he had the 10th most red zone targets and the 4th most goal to go targets in the NFL. There was very little DeAndre Hopkins there, but you don't see it in the touchdown numbers. He had a terrible touchdown rate, but he got a lot. Again, the 4th most goal to go targets in the NFL from week 7 through 18. I think that was all of his tenure with Arizona.
And his offense is one that we still have at least some minor red zone or touchdown rate questions about. Kingsbury, the combination of Kingsbury and Murray's frankly not been very good in that regard yet.
In terms of their passing efficiency there?
In the red zone and their passing touchdown rate.
Yeah.
They like to run the ball a lot in the red zone.
Sure. But again, he had the 4th most goal to go targets in that stretch. All right. So the rest of this tier, Herb Smith, Gerald Everett, Cole Kmet, Pat Freiermuth, and Mike Gesicki. Dan, what's your read on this tier?
So I do like Ertz a tier higher than Heath does. I have him in the tier 3 range. I believe I'm really happy to see just to look at his high slot percentage. So I also had concerns about Ertz coming into that offense, but then the way they utilized him as basically a big slot, it's an easy solution for Kyler Murray, and Kyler Murray needs easy solutions. He's a very short quarterback. He can't really he has not done a great job using the middle of the field. So Ertz is kind of that quick outlet. So I like Ertz, but the rest of this tier has some of my favorite guys that I like to target late. Gerald Everett, a player who produced in fantasy leagues for a lot of those who had Travis Kelce on the COVID list and had other players injured last year during that stretch on Russell Wilson. I'm a believer in his talent, and I'm a believer in his situation now as he moves to the Los Angeles Chargers. Cole Kmet is somebody who, look, you talk about Dalton Schultz versus Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet, to me, I see more upside there. I think he's a much more talented player. He moves well, better without the ball. He has decent numbers after the catch, with yards after the catch, and he, to me, has a chance for even better target share than Dalton Schultz there. I know the offense isn't going to be
target share, sure.
Yes, target share, right.
Total targets, I'd say no.
And then I have a few other players who really concern me in this tier. Mike Gesicki is somebody who I thought really profited from having a really high slot snap percentage. I think that's going to go down with the additions they've made at receiver. I also think that entire offense is going to look so completely different than it did last year. Just, you couldn't have a more drastic system change going from the weirdest offense I've ever seen in the NFL last year, using RPOs on such a high percentage, to a Mike McDaniel offense that's going to run the ball a lot. So Pat Freiermuth, for me, total avoid player as well. It's not the talent. I love Pat Freiermuth's talent. I think he's the most talented player in this tier potentially. But I think that the passing game is going to be a total disaster, no matter if it's Trubisky or Kenny Pickett running that offense with the offensive line situation there. And then Irv Smith's a guy who I've also stayed away from. I think Irv Smith's a bit overrated. I think we look at Irv Smith, and from a talent standpoint, I don't know if there's that much of a jump between Irv Smith and Cole Kmet. And Irv Smith has never produced on a consistent basis from a fantasy standpoint there either. So he's another player I avoid in this tier.
I did a Twitter defense of Irv Smith earlier today for no reason at all. So I'll just say, like, I think you can feel pretty confident based on the competition at the position, Kirk Cousins' history, and the O'Connell's history, and the fact they want to throw a bunch. You're going to get 80 plus targets from Irv Smith this year if he's healthy. And so at where he's at right now, in a good high volume pass offense. If he gets 80+ targets, he probably belongs in this tier. We don't know for sure if he's good. He played a year behind Kyle Rudolph. And then in 2020, he kind of transitioned. Rudolph got hurt at the end of the year. He was pretty good for the last month of the season. And then he missed all of last year. But he was an early declare who put up 700 yards and 7 touchdowns on a team with like every wide receiver in the NFL on it. Jerry Jeudy, Devontae Smith, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, all 4 on that team. And Irv Smith was right there with them. Well, not all of them. Jeudy was way ahead of everybody. So I don't want to rule out the possibility that he might be good. He was a 2nd-round pick who had some good production as a junior at Alabama. Mm-hmm. If he is good, he could be tight end 6.
And if Thielen gets hurt, then things change. And Thielen gets hurt all the time. So that,
I think yes, if Thielen doesn't get hurt, then it's probably either Osborne or Irv Smith who is fantasy relevant. If Thielen does get hurt, then it could easily be both.
But this is I'm not trying to make this about Dalton Schultz. I'm trying to make this about this tier. This is what I'm talking about, where at the end of the year, if Irv Smith gets his 80 targets, he might not be that much worse than Dalton Schultz. But in this tier, I don't know who's going to be consistent. And this is the type of tight end that drives you freaking crazy. Just wondering, do I stream? Is this the week where he's going to get his 7 targets, or is he going to have 3? You know what I mean? So I mean, I know. I think we all like Kmet because he could be 2nd on the team in targets. Maybe give you some of that consistency, but I don't really. You said you drafted this tier a lot, Heath. Uh-huh. I worry about the consistency of this tier. Not everyone, but it's Ertz, Irv Smith, Gerald Everett, Kmet, Freiermuth, Gesicki. I see 2 players there. I think there could be consistency. How about you? Non-injury, no non-injury to anyone else. As
I am not the guy to ask about consistency because I mostly ignore it and half think it's a myth. Like Dalton Schultz had 5 games last year with 21 yards or fewer.
Right. How is that consistent?
Well, but I think he's going to be better because Amari Cooper is not there. He had 2 games without Amari Cooper, and I think he had 7 or more targets in both games.
But they've replenished the wide receiver core there. I don't think
the offense. They have not. Jalen Tolbert is not Amari Cooper.
Adam, I don't think the offense, I agree with that. Of course. I mean, who wouldn't agree with that? But it's an absurd comment. But I don't think the offense looks at it like, oh, now we have Jalen Turbert, or now we have Michael Gallup.
Did you just call him Jalen Turbert?
Yes, I did. I think Jalen Tolbert or Michael Gallup once he's healthy. And now we have to drastically change how our offense runs. We're going to run it through Dalton Schultz. They're still looking to read. The progressions remain the same. They're still looking to run that offense via the outside in.
Like, one guy is going to be open all the time because Amari Cooper is great.
Is he going to be open all the time?
Amari Cooper was. So the guy I would compare it to is Gesicki in this tier. Mike Gesicki has had great numbers in the past when a guy like Preston Williams got hurt a few years ago, if you remember. The last 8 games of that season, Mike Gesicki went off. But when Mike Gesicki has had 2 reliable receivers on the field at the same time, you barely hear from him, and he's not worth rostering. So that's my concern with players in this tier, and Gesicki is one of them.
Yeah,
I understand the concerns. I just don't really see how Dalton Schultz supersedes all these. Like, what makes him so much better than some of these players in this tier?
Because I just don't think he has because he's on a higher pass volume offense than many of these guys, and I don't think he doesn't have the Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill factor. For Freiermuth, he doesn't have Johnson, Claypool, maybe Pickens. For Irv Smith, he doesn't have Jefferson, Thielen, KJ Osborne. I just think the situation is better. But again, I'm sorry. I don't want to bring this back to Schultz. I want to bring this about these guys in tier 4 that obviously don't have, which is why they're in tier 4. They don't have perfect situation.
Right. They're being drafted. We don't need to compare these guys to Dalton Schultz. They're being drafted 4 or 5 rounds later.
Right.
You should draft 2 of these guys if you're going to, or one of these guys and one of the tier 5 guys. And it's a bit of a lottery ticket situation. Like, we get to tier 5, there's also some guys who I think could end up being tight end 6. But every player in this tier, I don't really believe that Freiermuth could. I'm with Dan. But basically every player in this tier I think could be tight end 6.
Okay, so let's go to tier 5 then. Tier 5 is Tyler Higbee, Noah Fant, David Njoku, Evan Ingram, the very underrated Logan Thomas, as we've learned. Hayden Hurst and Albert O. Tyler Higbee, Noah Fant, David Njoku, Evan Ingram, Logan Thomas, Hayden Hurst, and Alberto. All right, what's tier 5 then, Heath?
A hodgepodge. Like Higbee, I've actually got projected higher than where I have him tiered here. He'd be in tier 4 if I was doing it just solely based on projections, but I'm just tired of touting Tyler Higbee. Fant, I think talent-wise might belong in tier 3, but it's a pretty terrible situation, and he's the third wheel in the pass offense. David Njoku is Cleveland OJ Howard. But like things could be great, or he could be catching passes from Jacoby Brissett. Evan Ingram was one of the worst tight ends in the NFL last year, but he's now Doug Peterson's probably number 1 tight end. Like it's a hodgepodge. There's not a theme here that I have.
Okay. And does this matter to you? I'm guessing it doesn't.
And I would say, like I just said, the tier 4 guys could be top 6 tight ends. The bar's low for this, but any of these guys could be top 10 tight ends.
If Tyler Higbee, his last 6 games, Tyler Higbee finished very strong. Mm-hmm. His last 6 games before the NFC Championship game, remember he got the ankle sprain, missed the Super Bowl, played 18% of the snaps in the NFC Championship game. The last 6 games, he had 41 or more yards in every game. 17-game pace was 82 catches, 878 yards, 6 touchdowns on 113 targets. You'd obviously sign up for that. This is Tyler Higbee I'm talking about here. I don't know what happened in those 6 games. I think the target share, I didn't have a chance to calculate that. I think it was a lot higher. I only think Robert Woods was missing.
I do think that there's maybe something to that Robert Woods maybe had a slightly bigger impact on Higbee than Odell Beckham. Like, I think those numbers you gave, Higbee might have been as good as Beckham in the final 6 games.
Yeah, probably not necessarily the touchdowns, but
right.
Yeah, the targets for sure. And
about 40 yards a game sounds like Odell Beckham.
The 2 times where Higbee's been good was the last 5 games of 2020, I believe. No, 2019.
That was
when Gerald Everett didn't play. Those were the only games that Higbee played without Everett. Everett played something like 10 snaps in those 5 games. And then this stretch here without Robert Woods weren't the only. He had played 2 games before that without Robert Woods and didn't do anything. So I don't know what to make of it, but maybe there's a boost there for him. But now they have Allen Robinson. So it's tough.
And is Allen Robinson as good as Tyler Higbee? I don't know.
And then the final tier is tier 6. Tier 6 has Robert Tonyan, Hunter Henry, Brevin Jordan, Austin Hooper, CJ Uzama, and Dawson Knox.
The theme of this tier is I tried to think of all of the guys that I might get yelled at for leaving out of my tiers, and I put them in this tier.
Well, Knox, I think, is the one that stands out because his ADP is a top 12 tight end. So,
but it's falling, that ADP.
Is it?
Yes. Take a look.
I probably need to move Dawson. I'm going to give OJ Howard a week or 2 of camp. And if the reports are as negative as they were at OTAs, then I need to move Knox up into tier 5. But he's he's Robert Tonyan or Freiermuth from last year almost. And I just don't buy into those guys that do almost nothing but score touchdowns.
I guess the question is, does he have the opportunity to do more than that now? And I'm just going to look at NFC ADP, 46 drafts since July 1st. He's tight end 10.
What?
So
Wow.
Dawson Knox. So yeah, I don't know that his ADP is
falling. This is something we need to talk about because some of these are best ball drafts, I believe.
Okay.
And if you have Josh Allen,
right,
then reaching for Dawson Knox to pair him for the stacking purposes. I think that happens with Gabriel Davis too, because he's like wide receiver 24 in best ball drafts and wide receiver 30 in regular redraft leagues.
Can you look at Scott Fishbowl ADP?
A lot of people are stacking in Scott Fishbowl because those final 3 weeks you want the correlation. So
I guess, but I don't understand. I don't understand why Knox. Why that? Look, he's on the team with Josh Allen. That's the appeal of Dawson Knox. They lost target getters 2 and 3 from last year's squad, Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders. He is going to be, I wouldn't say for sure, but he's obviously got the potential to be a nice red zone or green zone target. I think you guys are too low, and I think the drafters are probably too high on him at tight end 10. But I don't know. I don't think he belongs in a different tier. I guess I just don't see him as Robert Tonyan. But I'm not dying to draft Dawson Knox, but I do think you're not giving him quite enough.
What do you think is the difference between him and Robert Tonyan?
more pass volume and more passing yards for the offense. Right? Aaron Rodgers, and that's a run
much
first
less competition for targets for Tonyan.
I don't know. I mean, I
What?
don't know that Tonyan is in the discussion to really be a bit. First of all, he's hurt, right? He may not be ready for week 1, but I feel like Dawson Knox is a clear target getter. I have no idea what Robert Tonyan is. I don't know where Robert Tonyan is in the pecking order, but I don't know where anyone. I don't know what the pecking order is for the Packers. So
That's fair. I don't either.
Yeah.
I don't know that we really know what the pecking order is for the Bills after Stephon Diggs.
You know, if I had to guess, I would guess Gabriel Davis is 2 and Dawson Knox is 3rd in targets.
Wow.
That's my guess.
So you think that they are just moving away, like, because the slot wide receiver has been the guy that's kind of been the number 2 over the last few years. You think they're just doing away with the slot wide receiver?
No, but Jamison Crowder doesn't stay healthy. All right, so let's talk. Diggs 160. Davis, I don't even know, 110. And
that sounds
Knox,
very close to me. Yeah.
75 to 80 for Knox.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he had no, that's probably selling him short. He had 71 targets last year in 15 games. I'll give him 85 to 90. And at that point, you're definitely talking about a streamer, fantasy relevant tight end.
I mean, he had more targets than Gabriel Davis last year, so maybe.
That's what I'm saying. If people could be overestimating Gabriel Davis big time.
A player I like in this tier, Adam, that I think has a lot of hate, and we've already hated on, or you've already hated him on him on this show, is Hunter Henry. I know it seemed like a very touchdown fluky season last year, but he actually was 6th in slot snaps last year, which we have determined to be very sticky for tight ends, something you want to see. They're lining up in the slot. And actually, the ADOT was what really stood out to me for him. The average depth of target, he was 5th among tight ends in average depth of target that got at least a minimum of 20% of the targets on their team last year. Those are 2 stats that I like to see, two kind of underlying numbers to back up a potential for more for Hunter Henry as that offense takes a step forward, as Mac Jones gets better in the NFL. And we've seen, even from a touchdown perspective, there are some players, I'm not saying Henry will be this type of player, like Adam Thielen, who have, their touchdown percentage stays high because they're targeted so heavily within the red zone. And I think Henry could be one of those players as well.
I will say that if Dawson Knox is a top 10 tight end, then Hunter Henry should be top 12.
There we go.
They are very similar, except for the fact that Henry has actually been a good fantasy tight end before.
So, Dan, you probably don't. I'm guessing inline snaps are not something you like for a tight end.
Not at all. Unless your name is Rob Gronkowski or George Kittle, because you guys they're so good at blocking in line that they keep them there. But otherwise, yeah, you want the slot guys.
Okay. Because Dawson Knox does have a lot of inline snaps. He lined up inline more than anywhere else, followed by the slot, and then not too much out wide. All right. Let's read some Apple Podcast questions. Sorry, it's a little bit late in the show. We have another episode coming up later today. It'll publish on Friday. You'll have a mailbag. It'll be your emails at fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. And if you're on YouTube, you can ask us some questions there as well. We'll have Yahoo's Liz Loza joining us. This is from JR in Louisville. I've been listening since 2016. Can you spend some time discussing the biggest mistakes you all made in 2021 fantasy drafts? I think this would be incredibly helpful to hear the guys talk about what they learned from 2021 that they're applying to 2022. P.S. I voted Adam as the best male podcast host. That, of course, is not the category. It is the best podcast hosted by a male. But thank you for voting at podcastawards.com. All right, biggest mistakes, guys. Anything you want to bring up here?
I'm like an NFL corner.
You don't remember. Yeah, next
play. No, one thing I'm trying to do better this year from last year, and it's been a struggle. It's like Dave's running back struggle. I try to break free from my projections earlier in drafts every year.
Okay.
Like, I definitely shouldn't be caring about my projections in round 12, but I'd like to get to where I'm like, maybe I could get as early as like 7 or 8.
Dan?
Yeah, for me, it would probably be ignoring quarterbacks in 1 quarterback leagues and just assuming I can get 2 high upside guys late. I think Chris Towers has done a good job of breaking it down. Over the last 2 seasons, we've seen a big tier gap between those quarterbacks the quarterbacks who have and the quarterbacks who don't, the ones who are actually scoring a lot on a per game basis and those who aren't. And yeah, a couple of years ago, you could find Mahomes before his breakout late and you got a breakout. And the same thing happened with Lamar Jackson, but that is not necessarily the case, I don't think. And it's not going to be, it hasn't been the last 2 years. I don't think it's going to be this year, especially with Trey Lance's ADP creeping up, I think has the best case to be that player this year. So I'm going to change my strategy up a little bit this year. And I've seen it already in these one quarterback leagues. I'm finding myself, well, Kyler Murray's there round 5, round 6. I'm taking him. And I never used to do that. I never used to take the quarterback no matter what until, rounds 10, 11, or even sometimes toward the very end of the draft and then just look to stream. I think those days might be over.
Okay. And I didn't really make any mistakes last year. So
we knew that was coming. Despite the fact that you had like all of the dead zone running backs multiple times across multiple teams.
That's 100,000,000% not true. My biggest
you were a very big Mike Davis and Miles Gaskin.
Oh, are you kidding me?
Not Davis, but you had Gaskin on multiple.
I did not draft a single Mike Davis or Miles Gaskin.
Yes, you had Gaskin.
Either of those guys. You are a liar. You are a
Listeners League podcast. You went like 3 straight running backs in that range, and one of them was definitely Gaskin. I remember this.
I think you're lying. I hated Gaskin.
Gaskin, Chase Edmonds, you had them all.
Chase Edmonds, I did like. I had a lot of Chase Edmonds, and I think it was justified. My biggest mistake was not drafting Cooper Kupp. So I'm trying to figure out who this year, why did I was so in on Robert Woods and not at all on Cooper Kupp, and I don't know if there's a comparison this year, but I'll try to figure that out. This is from Core 2186. Have either of you any of you ever discussed trades live on the air amongst yourself in your respected leagues? We never brought up the dynasty trades, Heath, but we'll try to do that with you and Dave. Or maybe we did.
I've tried to make a trade with Dave on air like 17 times. So it's strange that you don't recall any of those.
Yeah, me and Jamie literally did this 2 weeks ago, Adam.
Yes. The YOLO League is where trades happen, our dynasty league. And I just did a complete teardown in a dynasty league that everybody hates what I did. So we could discuss that as well. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it's a fun segment, which we do it throughout the season as well. We try to make Heath and Dave make trades in their dynasty league.
Heath, I need to do the same because I inherited such a bad dynasty team. I'm looking to do a complete tear down. The problem is with Adam no longer in the league, I don't really have any marks in the league. So I have to kind of really work a little bit harder to get some value back for some of those players.
Funny comment. I've actually never been in the league. So
your name is plastered across one of the teams.
My name is on a team. Yes.
I just assumed they kind of like got rid of you due to inactivity.
By the way, is my name Ryan or is my name Adam? What do you think my name is? Just question. You can say. Go ahead. Go. You know my name. Go ahead. You can say it.
Rhetorical question.
Yeah, it's Adam. So, because a guy named Ryan drafted Miles Gaskin last year in the podcast league. So
not the league that I was in. The last draft we did that I was in, because you didn't invite me to most of those leagues because you hated.
What is that? The FFT league?
I think it was the one we did live on air. Yeah, you had like a string of like 4 straight running backs in the dead zone, maybe 3.
Oh no, you're probably thinking of my first 4 picks in the FFT league, which were Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Robert Woods, and Gus Edwards.
Nah, it's a different league, but whatever. Move on. We'll move past this. We'll see this year.
This is from Bugman. He says, "Great show, poor ADP." I don't love it was a 5-star review. I don't love the headline there. Gabriel Davis in round 7. He goes at the end of the 4th every time. His ADP is 46. He's talking about the Underdog app ADP. It gets it's misleading and it gets the listener Jack to steal him in round 6 when in reality he's going 20 picks earlier.
JJ Zacharias probably got that wrong. Late round QB on Twitter had responded to someone and said this is not a best ball tweet or this is mostly about redraft and not real. And I just said I want to pin this because best ball this time of year has become so prominent, and it's great, and I enjoy the format very much. But best ball ADP and redraft ADP are not the same thing and should not be the same thing. Gabriel Davis is going in the 4th round because, well, it's ridiculous anyway, but people want to pair him up with Josh Allen.
Right. Okay. I agree with this comment here on YouTube. Dan wants to be Adam. LOL. Wow. Yep. I think we've known that for a while.
Wow.
All right. This is from
Can you save that comment so I know who made that so I can use that for future reference?
Oh, he's on all the time. Broward Bravado.
I have seen Broward a lot. Me and him, Broward, we had some great conversation blasting Adam in the YouTube on the last live show. Now you're turning on me. All right.
I think it was a compliment, by the way. Traffic Cone
Yeah,
500 is in a salary cap PPR keeper league, $250 budget. Who should he keep? Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Mike Evans for a total of $192 out of $250. Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, and Travis Etienne for $176. So we'll save $16. Jonathan Taylor, Mike Evans, and Travis Etienne. That would be the cheapest, but would not include McCaffrey. And that would be $102 out of $250.
That's interesting. I think you can lean toward 192. I'm trying to do the math here. So I'm trying to just break down what each of these players cost, as that'll help us kind of determine which ones are worth keeping. I almost feel like you can do the one without McCaffrey because you're spending so much of your budget on McCaffrey in this situation.
So we know Evans is 16 more than Etienne.
Yeah.
And we know McCaffrey is 74 more than Evans.
Yeah, McCaffrey.
Oh, you can compare.
Yeah,
McCaffrey.
74 more than Evans. Yeah.
You can compare McCaffrey to Etienne. Oh yeah. I don't care. Also, the train left Chicago at 4:00 going 38 miles per hour. What time did it get to St. Louis? What's your answer here, guys?
I'm doing the one without McCaffrey.
I'm going to go Taylor, McCaffrey, Evans. YOLO.
All right, it is getting to be a long show, so let's do these last three quickly. From Stefke, what could I realistically expect in return for Clyde Edwards-Helaire and a late 2023 first-round pick? Heath?
So that's basically a late 2023 first and an early 2023 second in my mind. I think you could get close to a low-end number one running back if you could find, if you want a running back, I'd be targeting, I assume you're a contender if you're trading your first pick and you think it's going to be late. So maybe one of these 26 or 27-year-old running backs that happen to be on a team that's not a contender would be my first target. All
right, next one is from Guides. And this was another 5-star review, but the subject was down year. You can't do that. I agree with the emailer from the last show. This year's fantasy draft is one of the worst ones in memory. So you're talking about, you put down year. Kind of sounds like you're talking about our podcast. That's okay. The top running backs are unimpressive. Receivers are more shallow this year because of the lack of quality. Quarterbacks, all the way around, the consensus rankings just feel sad. I'll still participate, but I'm not as excited as normal. Oh, man. I don't know. There's plenty to be excited about. It's just very unpredictable this year.
Yeah, I think that might actually make it more exciting, but I do agree with the listener. It's been a weird year as I go through these drafts. I feel like there's less talent at receiver than normal. I actually think there is maybe more running back talent than normal. As I go through these drafts, I used to never take running backs in that rounds 3 through 6 range, and I found myself looking at the board and being like, can I definitely count on this wide receiver to be a target hog and a passing offense that's meh? Or should I just take Ezekiel Elliott for the bounce back? Or should I just take J.K. Dobbins, 2 players that I think could ultimately be really valuable players on your roster in that range? So I think it's a good year for running backs ultimately. The dead zone running backs to me are better than they typically are.
Yeah, well, especially if you took Myles Gaskin and Mike Davis, which of course I did not. From Wake Up 23, we'll do
a deeper dive into that, and I'll audit it a little more thoroughly after the show.
You're wrong. I think I read this last week, but I'm not sure. So I don't want to shortchange Wake Up 23. It's a 10-team PPR keeper league, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers. I have Devontae Adams and Deebo Samuel as keepers in the first and the second round. And who would you take with the first pick of the draft? He's already got Adams and Deebo. Would you take Jamar Chase, Kelsey, McCaffrey, Mixon, Pitts, Fournette, or Kamara, or Swift, or Evans, or blah, blah, blah? Not going to be any of them.
McCaffrey.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a little, yep, go ahead.
I'm sorry for the marathon, everybody. Appreciate you all being here. And again, we've got F15 and 5 to do. We got a lot of stuff, but most importantly, 5 p.m. Eastern. Join us on YouTube to watch that episode with Liz Loza and Dan Schneier. And we'll talk to you later on Fantasy Football Today.